Let's start up front, Ryan, and look at the defensive line because I think that for me, and I know for some people it's the safeties. We'll get to them because I think people are going to disagree with us when we talk about the safety group. But when I look at the defensive line class, Ryan, I gave it, I gave the defensive line and the safeties a similar grade, and for different reasons. I gave them the same grade actually for different reasons, and I gave them a B. So I went with B because again, what does B mean in our grading system? Because you have to understand what we mean by B when we say that a group got a B. It's an outstanding haul. It's a top 15 caliber group. I think you could argue for B plus if you're going to look at if you're going to focus more on the upside, you could give them an A minus. But here's some of the things that kind of dragged it down a little bit for me. It's not even the fact that they don't have an edge rusher, because again, I don't think that was needed. You didn't need Keon Keeley because, boy, we're desperate for a Viper. You needed Keon Keeley because you don't have anyone like him on your roster. That is a gap erasing type of player, right? And so that's why they also didn't lose their minds trying to replace him, because the main needs in this, they needed length, they needed power, they needed guys who could play inside. That's what this group staff needed, because as the season wore on, yeah, Josh Burnham moved to Viper. Yeah, Aiden Gobayer can play there. Junior Tuihalamaka started playing there more during the season. So the staff decided it's not a great Viper year, and there's nobody that we can get right now. I mean, sure, they'd love to have Keon Keeley, Damon Wilson, Caleb Herring. For the life of me right now, Shandavian Bradley. Those are guys that the staff liked a lot. They weren't getting those guys. Right. And there's a reason Ohio State didn't get Damon Wilson. So even if for some reason Notre Dame did land at Damon Wilson, guess what? He's flipping for an NIL deal at the end anyway, if you're to believe what is being reported by some Ohio State people, right? Mm-hmm. How true that is, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. It's being reported by others. But would it shock you and fit in line with everything else we hear about kids from that region? No, not at all. So they met their needs with length. They added size. They added power. Those are all things that this staff needed, more than you needed a pure edge rusher. Mm-hmm. I want a pure edge rusher, however, every year. Right? Whether it's a need or not, I'm trying to land an edge rusher every year. So I am going to ding them a little bit for that, even though it wasn't necessarily need. I also think that I give the staff a lot of credit for finding these high upside guys like Boubacar Traore, like Armel Mukam, to a degree, Devin Houston. But at the same time, it's always risky when you're taking that, when your class is built around them, because the Adi Ogundeji class had Adi Ogundeji, who was a 215-pound defensive end whose upside I loved. I gave him a 4.5-star upside grade. However, he also had Khalid Kareem in that class, Julian Akwar in that class, and Dalen Hayes in that class. And Dalen and Khalid were both very high floor guys. And then Julian Akwara was a lot like Adi in that he was a lower floor because he was like 205 pounds when he signed Notre Dame. He was a low floor but very high ceiling guy. But you still had those two high floor guys built in. And I don't view Brennan Vernon as the kind of high floor guy that Khalid Kareem and Dalen Hayes were. He is also a little bit of boomer bust for me because of the injuries, because of the fact that you don't quite know where he's going to play. He's just not a sure thing. But again, like the others, Brennan has a very high ceiling. If he can stay healthy and develop, he's got a very high ceiling. But he's more of a 5 technique, power end, 3 technique, potentially even a nose guard if he keeps filling out in this defense nose guard. So I love that about him. But again, he's got as talented as he is, there's still parts of his game. His problem was his high school didn't use him correctly, in my opinion. They just kind of put him out there and said, go be a big dude. And he was. Right. They didn't really turn him loose a lot. So the production doesn't equal the talent. That matters to me when I'm evaluating, when I'm talking about grades. Boubacar was a little banged up this year. He's still a projectable kid. Devin Houston's the most impactful kid they had at the high school level. He was the most productive they had the last 2 years. He's probably the highest floor guy that they have, and I like him a lot too. So there's a lot I like about this defensive line class, Ryan. But if we're talking about stacking it up against the best of the best, it just doesn't quite live up to, or doesn't quite meet that standard the way that the linebacker group does, the cornerback group does, the O-line group does, the receivers, the running backs, the quarterbacks. It just doesn't quite stack up based on what we know about the class. But I'll say this, if they can develop it, this class has a chance to surprise and far outplay its ranking. It's just, as you said, Ryan, when you have the lower floor guys, unless you catch a little bit of luck or you have a great developer, the reality is you're just going to be in situations where you're just not the odds of them all panning out is just, it just doesn't happen that way. What happened with the 2016 class is rare. They literally all panned out to some degree. They literally all were NFL players. All 4 of them got drafted. That is such a rare thing. Mm-hmm. And part of it is because 2 of them had very high floors. And that's a big part of it.
Well, and I would say this too, Brian. I mean, from a ranking perspective, you can't rank this group that high. You can't do it because of that variance, right? You have to take the floor into competition because there's going to be some opportunity for those guys to play also. Like we didn't talk about that a ton, right? But there's going to be some opportunity inside at defensive tackle with Jason Admiral leaving and trying to find impact talent in there. There's going to be some opportunities at Viper if there's a guy that can play that position. Obviously, I don't think there is that guy in this class, but there's going to be opportunities to play. I mean, if you start toying with Riley Mills inside, then there's going to be an opportunity at big end for maybe one of these guys to get some playing time, right? So I think there's going to be opportunities. I don't think there's a ton of high floor guys. I agree 100% with you on that. I would say this from the positive perspective, obviously, and you hit on this already. I disagree with some people at times about what is missing with this defensive line at Notre Dame in general. Everyone always talks about weights. I don't think it's just weights, guys. I think it's length, right? I think it's the body types where you can add that weight sufficiently. Like, why does everyone keep talking about Justin Scott in 2024? It's because not only is he 300 pounds, he's also 6'5" and still put on a lot more weights. You got a ton of length in this class, man. I mean, you want to talk about drawing it up on the board? Like, Boubacar Traore is what it looks like. He's 6'4" with an 80-inch wingspan. Like, you want that type of dude. Armel Mukam is 6'4", almost the same exact size as Boubacar Traore, and probably right around the same type of arm length. Like, he is vines for arms. Brennan Vernon is 6'5", now probably 280-plus pounds, and he's got really nice length for his position. And the great thing about Brendan Vernon, too, Brian, is although he's a big kid, he can still put on a substantial amount of weight, in my opinion. It's still a clean frame. Like, he's not fat, right? Like, he's just a good-looking frame. Like, he could be 6'5", 300 in a snap of a finger. Like, he can be that type of dude. So maybe that is your 3-tech. Maybe he is your penetrating nose type. Yes.
Would you argue that he went from a little overrated to very underrated during the course of the last year? Yes. Like, I never felt he was, and I said this at the time, he was not, in my opinion, a top 10 to 15 guy. Mm-hmm. Like Rivals had him when they first had him. Yep. But now people don't even have him in their top 250. And I think that's absurd. Like, to me, he's a top 250 or top 150-ish kind of guy because because of the combination of floor plus ceiling, body type, and all that kind of stuff. You look at his rankings, On3 has him at number 257. ESPN has him at number 111. Rivals has him at 60. And then 247 doesn't even have him in the top 247 guys. So one service has him as the number 7 defensive lineman in the country, and another has him number 40. It's a pretty big gap. To me, I kind of view him right now as closer to between ESPN and On3, 111 to 257. Is kind of where I'd have him, but closer to 111 than 257. But I'd say my range for him is in there. I think he's like around 145 to 165 for me. But some of the people I think have really underrated him quite a bit, whereas early on he was ranked a little too high for me because at the time they thought he was going to Ohio State. So, that's why he was ranked that high, for being honest.
We talked about this yesterday a little bit on IB Nation Sports Talk. Someone actually put the question in the mailbag and was like, why is no one talking about Brendan Vernon? And I think a lot of it is he's been in the class forever. He's a Notre Dame commit, right? But then also he doesn't have a flashy game, right? Like, he does a lot of the dirty work for his team. Like, he 2-gaps a ton. He plays down. He works in the run game, plays the pursuit. Like, he does a lot of the dirty work. And plus, he hates media. He hates social media. Like, he doesn't give a flip about any of that stuff, which is surprising how well Brian, I don't know if you heard some of the interviews that he did on signing day. It was really good, man. I was like, oh, okay. He opened up to some reporters for once. It was fantastic. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, he is underrated tremendously, in my opinion. And I think, getting back to the original point is that, I mean, Brian, like, he could be 6'5", 300 pounds before – in the snap of a finger. Devin Houston could be 6'4.5", near 300 pounds, or at 300 pounds in a snap of a finger. Boubacar Traore and Armel Mukam both have size profiles where I say with their 80-inch wingspans, those guys can fill out and be 270 plus playing defensive end still. Like they can still be those types of dudes. So you got power, you got length. I think you did meet a tremendous need on the roster in the sense that you need to get longer up front. There's no doubt about that. You need that size profile. But to your point, you still can't rank them super high because there is so much question to the floor. There is. I mean, which one of these guys is for sure going to play year 1 and year 2? I don't know if the answer is 100%. Exactly.
Can you guarantee me that any of them can play big end?
Well, I asked that with Devin Houston yesterday, Brian. I was like, the interesting part of this defensive line class is that I have a mind, like I have a idea of where each one of you guys will probably end up, but I don't know for sure. Like there's so much variance to it. And he talked about that, how each one of them have similar-ish skill sets, and they have, big bodies and long frames and all those types of things. So yeah, I mean, and he mentioned it. He said it's a possibility that maybe we're all interior guys down the line, and we're just rotating into 2 spots. I'm like, you're not wrong. Like you might all be interior guys down the line.
And
it's
that's
possible.
The concern.
So,
that's the concern, Ryan. There's a chance that they could all fit. All 4 of them could fit best as 3 techniques and noses.
Yeah.
Now I think Armel Mukum's going to end up being an edge player. He's the one I'm most confident in being an edge player. So, but you can't play them as a foursome right now based on what we know.
No.
Together.
Somebody's going to be out of position
in the current defense. Yeah. Right.
Yep.
In the current defense, I just don't think that fits.
But I will say this, Brian, is if you hit, it's putting more pressure on 2024 from an edge perspective, right?
And last year's class.
Yes.
You need Burnham and Gobira to pan out.
But the positive is that what can change the grade down the line is obviously if they hit their ceiling, but also if 2022 and 2024 you hit a little bit of a nice little trend on edge players, and then down the line you got all these 6'4" plus behemoths playing inside. Now you've changed the profile a little bit,
Bingo.
Like you don't have Howard Cross types playing interior defensive line all over the place, right? Now you have guys that are 6'4" plus with vines playing all up and down the line of scrimmage, and that's where things change. So we'll see.